Welcome to Comics and the Cross, the greatest content creators you have never heard of. My name is LJ, and I'm here with the game that inspired this whole series. A few months ago, while on vacation, fellow team member Nitro and I were reminiscing about some old video games. The one that we connected over was called WeaponLord. It's an obscure title that came out in 1995 on the Genesis and Super Nintendo that we didn't expect anyone else to remember but ourselves. That moment inspired me to start Memory Card, and so I'm happy to tell you about what made WeaponLord so awesome. Developed by Visual Concepts and published by Namco, WeaponLord is a fighting game that was released during an era when the industry was moving away from 2D fighting games such as Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, which had been released years prior. Though the game still featured 2D backgrounds and sprites, it preceded Soul Calibur as a weapon-based fighting game and shared similarities to Samurai Showdown. And while Mortal Kombat is definitely responsible for today's ESRB ratings, WeaponLord happens to be more visceral, and its advanced mechanics were ahead of its time. What I enjoy most is that it wears its influences on its sleeve, specifically Conan the Barbarian and Highlander. In addition, its art style gives off the same energy as an edgy 90s comic. The sound effects combined with the music, specifically the Genesis version in my opinion, immerse you into the battle even today. Looking back, it makes sense why my older brother enjoyed this game. Those were two of his favorite movies, and he was particularly invested in that style of comics. That influence passed on to me. Therefore, I have fond memories of that sweet intro music and the many times he chose Kor, the sword-wielding barbarian, to face off against me as Bane, the club-wielding man-beast. I was only a little kid at the time, and I surely button-mashed and lost every fight. But the memories remain. And as an adult, it strongly holds up, mostly due to the mechanics and challenging difficulty. WeaponLord stands unique to this day as the button inputs work much different than any fighting game. You need to hold the button and then do the motion, whereas most of the time you usually need to do the motion and then press the button, like in Street Fighter. I learned a few moves with a few characters, but there aren't any comprehensive lists outside of GameFAQs walkthroughs these days. I couldn't figure out any of the inputs for the barbaric victories, what WeaponLord calls its fatalities. It is a bit of a shame, because you must learn those for the story mode. If you don't pull them off, you'll need to fight the opponents that you left alive before reaching the final boss. And if you left all of them alive, you'll have to fight all of them again. WeaponLord has some mechanics you've likely seen in other games, such as a forward parry, and a mechanic in which that the fighter's weapons clang against one another depending on the inputs. And for aesthetic, you might even also cut off a piece of clothing or hair in the process. I played through WeaponLord's story mode on easy and still button mashed mostly, if I'm completely honest, and was met with a generic message for the ending. Locking true endings behind higher difficulties wasn't uncommon at this time, but after some research, that was indeed the case. To my surprise, you need to beat it on the highest difficulty to see the entire endings for some characters. Though the game does have a password system and emulation has the power of save states, I will not be attempting that. After revisiting the game, I'm happy to say that my glasses are not rose-tinted. In fact, I've learned much more about the game than I ever knew, and I have a greater appreciation for it than I ever did. In my research, I learned that WeaponLord was one of the first fighting games built with online play in mind, thanks to a software called X-Band. This software seemed ahead of its time, as it had features like matchmaking. Unfortunately, the software failed, and WeaponLord never got to see its true potential. If you have a love for fighting games, I recommend looking into it more, and if you have played WeaponLord, share your thoughts and memories with us in the comments. Again, I will not be scoring any games in this series. This memory card series is mostly meant for reminiscing over old games that I've gotten to play in the past, and it is meant to also discover some new ones that maybe you enjoyed. If this happens to be your first time watching and you've made it this far into the video, Consider leaving a like and subscribing for more Comics and the Cross content, and let me know if there's a game you would like me to cover on the next memory card.